Hey, this is Rob, and this is episode 33 of the Folly Coffee Podcast. Let's get it brewing.
1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, so this episode was a great one. This guy, John Waller, owner of Humble Nut Butters. Check this out. Whew, look at that packaging. That is beautiful. So Humble Nut Butters, let's let that focus. Humble Nut Butters is this awesome local company. They are doing really high-end nut butters with like really savory ingredients. John noticed a gap in the market that all nut butters were either sweet or like salty. There's no like savory option. And so him and his wife founded Humble Nut Butters. To tie it into a coffee podcast, he also worked for Intelligentsia for 2 years, and he has a really cool backstory, really smart business guy, and so there's a lot of information, a really, just a jam-packed episode full of his background at Groupon, and then Intelligentsia, back to a tech startup, worked for Enterprise out of college. Really cool story about how he got to where he is. Just got into Whole Foods with Humble Nut Butters. It's really a great episode. So I will shut up and say enjoy. All right, I am here with co-founder and CEO of Humble Nut Butters, John Waller. I explained how I met him in the intro, or the intro I will record. Is this your first podcast?
It's my second.
Second podcast. Okay, I'm gaining super high over here, so let me go lower down a little bit there. So second podcast, so we don't have to go through stuff. Just very conversational, very laid back. I first met you back when we were at Modest Brewing for the Northern Coffee Alliance event where we were sampling I was sampling cold brew for Filterra. You were sampling Humble Nut Butter, and I was like, came over and just like really high-end nut butters with like really interesting spices with like a depth of flavor that was really intriguing to me. And so let's not start at Humble Nut Butter because I know some things about you that let's get to Humble Nut Butter. Like, what has your professional career been that led to the point of starting Humble Nut Butter?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Rob. Appreciate it, man.
It feels very radio. You got it.
Yeah. So I've spent my entire career in sales leadership. I've worked for 5 companies, some large private companies, some fun, quirky startups. I worked for Intelligentsia Coffee, which you've probably heard of. They make some, high-end, premium quality, third wavy coffee, Rob, right up your alley.
Heard of them once or twice.
Yeah, right. And then went to work for another tech startup, and then I sold some supply chain software, and it's been a great career. But the older I've gotten, I've realized, okay, like what I've done thus far hasn't really been that fulfilling. I've met some great people. I've learned a ton along the way. But I've also thought about my life and, certain patterns in my life. And some of the best decisions I've made in my life have been when I've made a bet on myself. And so that's one reason I'm sitting here today, is because we made the decision, my wife and I, for me to leave my job and go all in on Humble full time.
And so you're referring to all these other, what was your length in time? So where are you originally from?
I was born in Iowa,
okay.
A small town called Algona, Iowa, North Central.
I've biked through there before.
Have you really?
On Regbra, yeah.
Hilarious. It would probably took you like 30 seconds to bike through.
Yeah, well, for me, like 38, 39.
And then we moved to Ames, Iowa. And from there, we moved to Washington State. My dad was in the newspaper industry, and so he got a good opportunity to be a publisher of a paper in Southwest Washington, so right between Seattle and Portland. Moved there when I was in 5th grade, stayed there until I graduated high school, went to the University of Kansas for college, because my older brother and sister both went to KU from Iowa. I fell in love with it as a young kid. It's the only school I applied to. So in 99, graduated high school, moved to Lawrence, Kansas. After I graduated from KU, I lived in KC for 4 years. And then moved to Chicago, which is probably the single best decision that I've ever made. So moved to Chicago. It was 2009, in a recession. Left my first job, which is with Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Mm-hmm. Great place to start your career. They're known for their management training, but they're also great for their diverse hiring practices. And I was in a B2B sales role, so I was leading I had my own book of business where I was selling program vehicles back to car dealerships. So I had like 45 franchise car dealerships in my territory, and I had a little bit more independence and autonomy than most, earlier in their career at Enterprise, but I knew I didn't want to do it forever. And Chicago, I fell in love with Chicago too. The first time I ever visited was probably in middle school, and it was a goal of mine to live there. And finally I said, F it. Like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. So I quit my job in a recession. People thought I was crazy. You're going to like this, though. I was quoting Thoreau, and one of the best quotes I've ever heard. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionability of man to elevate his life by conscious endeavor. And that's what I was doing. I was elevating my life. It was a conscious endeavor or a calculated risk, and worked out well. I'm actually getting chills.
It just got real here.
I know, dude. Yeah. It's the coffee you gave me. I'm just ready to rock. So that was a great decision. I lived with my brother and his new wife at the time. They're still married.
I'm sure he was thrilled about that.
Yeah, right? Like, she totally did her new husband a favor by letting his brother stay with them. They're awesome people. They live in Lincoln Square, a great neighborhood in Chicago. I lived there for, I think, 3 months. I read about Groupon in the Chicago Tribune when they were brand new, and I was kind of blown away by their business model, both as a consumer and then also as a merchant. And LinkedIn was pretty new at the time, and I found the CEO and founder on LinkedIn, and had to work him a bit until he let me in, basically. And so it's a long way of explaining where I'm from. But we moved from Chicago 5 years ago.
And so that was like 2009 you did that?
Yeah, moved from KC to Chicago in 2009, and then spent about 6 years in Chicago. Met my wife in Chicago.
And was Groupon growing during this time of the recession? Was this something that the recession was hitting them, or were they growing because it was a very innovative business model at the time?
It was a very innovative business model that spawned from the recession, because these merchants needed bodies, right? And consumers wanted the deal. And it wasn't your typical discount shop or restaurant that was offering this. It was like a great place where you would actually want to go for 50% off or more in some cases. And so, like, it was this win-win. And it was incredible, man. It was a fun, quirky, super dynamic startup. And then, we started building towards our IPO, and we got a little bit more organized and grown up. We had the IPO, post-IPO, all those transformations within one organization. Was basically like 4 different companies, and I've got dear friends that I'll have forever because of Groupon.
It's interesting. It reminds me of this article I just read, because I've been doing quite a bit of research into the 2009 recession. When I was fresh out of college, and so I don't know that I was even fully aware. Like, once I got my job at Sam Adams, it was 2009, and the recession was kind of on the upswing. So I don't think it affected me a ton personally. And so I've been doing a lot of my own research into like the effect it's had on business and culture, and to try to, and this was again a week ago, and things have changed since then, but try to get a feel for what might happen with the economy, what might happen. And one of the interesting tangents I got on was the effectiveness of new strategies and getting more aggressive during downturns, and then also specifically to what the reason I'm bringing this up is you found a job during a recession.
Yeah.
And that seems really counterintuitive, but anyone that knows me knows I love that. And the reason I like that move is that if you get hired by a company when things are amazing and the economy is awesome, everybody looks like they're doing really well.
Yeah.
But your job security is very low if things get bad. If you're hired by a company when there's a recession, when things are bad, when business shouldn't be good, your job security and your position in that company is probably more important, because they're probably being very, very picky about who they're hiring, who they're working with. And one of my favorite quotes about something like that is somebody I used to work for at Sam Adams said that when the tide goes down, it'll show who's not wearing a swimsuit. And so when the tide of the economy goes down, it really does expose, and then businesses like Groupon that you were hired for. And so it does seem counterintuitive, but if you, and see, here's the big if you can find a job.
Right.
And that's the big if.
100%.
But if you can find a company that values what you do, And so what was your role at Groupon? What were you doing there? You went from B2B sales at Enterprise, moved to Chicago with no job lined up, and went to Groupon. What was your pitch as like, this is why you should hire me?
You know, my job after I left Enterprise was to find a job. Chicago's an incredible city, as you know, so, you could still go out and party and go to Lollapalooza and play in the intramural leagues.
This means we lived in Chicago at the exact same time, because I moved
there.
Yeah, I moved there June of 2009.
Did you really?
Yeah, I worked for Sam Adams. I lived in Bucktown.
I think I moved there in... Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was there in May. Hilarious. We probably crossed paths at one point. So, I had the autonomy that I could go to Lollapalooza or whatever and have fun, but I would still wake up early every day and, hustle until I found a job. My pitch to Groupon, at this point, they had some funding behind them, and they were rapidly expanding, and it was a complete market grab, or land grab for market share. And I told them at that point I had 4 legitimate years of both leadership and sales experience. And if you can sell to car dealers, really you can sell anything. So that's what really I cut my teeth in sales doing, is negotiating with owners and GMs of car dealerships that will negotiate down to the penny. They will not answer your calls. They will not answer your emails. So I would... Well, can I say ass on here?
Yeah.
I would walk my happy ass into the dealerships because they wouldn't answer, right? And I could see them like rolling their eyes as I would park my vehicle and walk in. But it toughened me up and forced me to think about things like value propositions and handling objections and not letting your ego get in the way and things like that. So my pitch to Groupon was, listen, if you're going to hire an account executive, which is the role, that, I can do this, absolutely. Even though this is a brand new concept that people really haven't wrapped their heads around, I know how to connect with people, even if it's remote. So the office was in Chicago, but we launched Nashville and Portland simultaneously. And because I grew up an hour and a half north of Portland, they assigned me to Portland. I had some familiarity with that market. And so that, I think, also helped me. And after I had the phone screen with their director of HR, who's still a great guy to this day, his name's Dan Jessup. He probably won't listen to this, but great dude and hilarious.
Oh,
like him.
No, he probably will. We have a huge reach.
Of course he will. He's in New York. So he let me in, and then I presented to some of the other founders. And so because they were in a complete land grab, they also realized quickly that they needed leadership. They were hiring swaths of people every month. And I got tapped by the SVP of sales, as they were looking for more divisional sales managers. They had 2 at the time, 2 great people I'm still friends with. And I said, absolutely. Like at that point in my career, I had enough sales experience, I thought, and I wanted more leadership experience. And I said, absolutely, I would love to take on a leadership role. And they said, okay, well, you're going to manage 3 markets. We'll give you like a week or 2. We'll see how it goes. And like a week later, they said, by the way, here's like 7 more markets. Because I think they got more funding. I didn't see necessarily what, like everything that was going on, but things were moving so dynamically that they gave me 7 new cities. And at that point, I was managing like New Orleans and Pittsburgh and Dallas and Vancouver, BC. And eventually, as they scaled, they brought in more leaders. We regionalized. So I ended up managing the Pacific Northwest markets.
And at this time, were they giving you a lot of direction and training on how to handle these markets? Or were you leaning a lot in your past experience or just intuition?
Mainly past experience and intuition. But as we scaled, we would hire sales trainers and refine our pitch. Mm-hmm. And we would develop merchant tools because a lot of the merchants got totally overwhelmed. Right? Like hundreds of people showing up at the same time,
right.
Running out of food, Yelp reviews spiraling out of control. Like there were some disasters, some major disasters that we learned the hard way.
Yeah.
So initially I relied on my experience and some instincts, and then they refined them over time.
Yeah. I can't imagine that where somebody, you're trying to sell to them to get them to use the service, but you also have to sell and almost be like wary that, hey, this might go really, really, really well. You should be prepared for that. And that would sound to me, I'd be like, this is the most bogus sales pitch ever. Somebody's like, you got to be prepared if this is too successful. But it's a very real thing when you're making any moves of like, what is the best case scenario? Because that can put you under too.
Right.
And,
Right.
and I remember reading about that with Groupon. I remember specifically there's like a cupcake shop. That's some article, and she's like, I went out of business because it was, well, first of all, the deal was too good for her to sustain. There was the first issue. But she's like, oh, I'll just run the short promo for a week, and it'll be online deliveries of cupcakes. But she was losing money on the deal, and it was a nationwide deal that it put her under because she had to fulfill these orders.
Yeah, we learned the hard way, and we got better and gave merchants more tools and preparation. We extended some of the deals beyond 24 hours initially. We allowed them to be a little bit more restrictive too. Initially, it was, listen, the gloves are off. Let's make this the absolute best deal possible. And I think some of that was fueled by the psychology that we had from the recession. People wanted the deal, and businesses needed it. Right, but then we slowly started like tapering that a bit and said, all right, well, we can't go that aggressive. And
so, were you living in Chicago during this entire time?
Yeah. Lived all over Chicago. Lived for 3 months in Lincoln Square with my brother and his wife, and then moved to Lakeview, and then I met this beautiful young lady who's now my wife. Luckily enough for me. And I kind of followed her towards the Gold Coast / Old Town neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And then I
moved there too.
Did you really? Whereabouts?
In 2010 in Old Town.
Hilarious. Like what streets?
I don't even remember this point. Lindell Boulevard?
Could have been.
I don't know.
I was on south of Wells.
Yeah, we were right by each other then.
My wife at the time was living on State and Schiller, and I was actually on Clark. Mm-hmm. Clark and Burton, actually. But yeah, so I was like right between Gold Coast and Old Town. And then we moved together in Lakeview, got married, and then moved to Wicker Park and had our daughter, Maeve. And we quickly realized instantly that I don't know if we can sustain the family dynamic in the heart of the city. Mm-hmm. Like, we're sharing walls with neighbors. We had, can I say the S word?
Yes.
We had some shitty neighbors, especially, the one above us that would be up at all hours of the night, and we had a newborn. So we just decided this is not going to work. And we looked at, other more family-friendly neighborhoods in Chicago. We looked at Evanston. We looked at other suburbs. We looked at Denver, Boulder, and then Minneapolis was on our radar, just from a livability perspective and the values that we knew of that were in Minneapolis. And my dad had since retired from Washington State to northern Minnesota, and that was really the impetus for us to move here. So, and then I just started networking, and when we decided to move to Minneapolis, we just made the decision, this is best for our family, let's do it.
And part of that decision was that you're going to leave Groupon too, or were you trying to get them to be able to support your move as well?
So I left Groupon to go to Intelligentsia Coffee.
What year was that?
That would have been 2012.
And how the heck do you go from Groupon to high-end specialty coffee?
Right? Groupon was an incredible ride.
So this is a bit of a rebound backwards. So this is is this before or after you've had your child?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. This is before I had my child.
Because I don't know, this is a coffee podcast, so Intelligentsia, our listeners are like, wait, what? Did you skip over that part?
Yeah. So after Groupon, I went to Intelligentsia Coffee to be the director of sales. I found out about that opportunity through a recruiter. But the brand itself, I was captivated by. When I lived in Lakeview, I lived close to their Broadway location, which is their first ever store.
Yeah, the flagship location.
Yeah. And, I lived right across the street from a Caribou, and of course there was a couple Starbucks around. And, I was at that point, I was not a coffee aficionado. I'm still not, but I drink it daily, and I'm a consumer, and I pay attention to CPG now, and we'll get into that. But I was captivated by how Intelligentsia handled the coffee making process, the outline of their stores, how they merchandised things, their focus on quality. I was fine paying more for a cup of coffee because it was the experience and the quality of the cup, and I hadn't tasted coffee that bright.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing we face with Folly still is that it's like the coffee tastes better. It's funny because you say you're across from a Caribou. Obviously, you've had Starbucks, and you hear the debate of people like Starbucks versus Caribou, and I go, At that point, you're just debating like which one makes you feel better, which one feels like the marketing approach. The coffees are pretty dang similar. And so when a new coffee comes along, and that the exact experience I had is tasting Sump down in St. Louis was like, oh, wait a second, this is what coffee is?
Yeah.
And Intelligentsia is one of those amazing brands that I don't know how, but they are scaled in such a way, but the quality has not tapered. And
Never.
if it has, it's not much.
Right.
And that, just thinking of the science of roasting is pretty damn impressive. They have really talented people over there.
They do.
So does this recruiter reach out to you first and then you look into it and go taste the coffee, or were you were fully aware of it because you're by that Broadway location?
I was fully aware of it, and they've got a strong following. They weren't as big at the time as they are now, and of course they've been bought by Pete's. But at the time, if you paid attention to, I would say, chef-driven restaurants or high-end bars like the Aviary or the Violet Hour in Wicker Park, across from Big Star, you knew about Intelligentsia, right? And so I'd already been aware of them, and I was a fan. Like, I would go there every Sunday. This is pre-kids. I could wake up whenever I wanted. I'd go and have a croissant, have some coffee. I'd read the paper, and it was a great way to start the day. And that was my routine. And I knew this recruiter already, because at that point I knew that I wasn't going to be at Groupon much longer. It was just time for a change. They made me aware of this position, and I jumped on it. It was a sexy title. It was a new opportunity to get into a new industry with a brand that I liked and respected. And so on paper, it was a great opportunity.
Give me a second just to check this thing out.
Yeah.
Make sure that's still recording. This is still recording. And we're back with a drastically reduced video quality of John's section. So, sales recruiter, sexy title, Intelligentsia. You know the coffee, you know the brand. What do they approach you with? How do they what's appealing about it to you?
To be the director of sales, to tap into my sales experience, to represent a brand that I really respected and consumed myself. And then to
so
lead a team.
At this point, Intelligentsia, now you look at it and you go, okay, this is this national brand. It's owned by Pete's Coffee. Like, if you're into coffee, you've probably heard of it. They're what I consider to be the lead specialty coffee. And I use specialty coffee very different than how like Starbucks uses it. But the biggest of the small businesses in a way. Not that they're a small business, but you get my point here. At that point, were they national? Would you consider them more of a regional brand? And when they hired you, what was the strategy behind it? What were they saying that your major responsibilities would be?
They were national, yeah. So roasting facility in their headquarters in Chicago. They had a roastery in LA with a sizable staff there, and then their own cafes. So cafes in Chicago, LA. They had a roasting facility in San Francisco. Plans to build out there for retail. And then in New York, they had a training lab and then a sales presence there. And then we had some sales representation in Atlanta. Great opportunity. Company had been through some transformations, and wanted to really, I think, catapult growth, right? Both in terms of retail, so adding new cafes. So while I was there, we added a bunch of new cafes. We focused on grocery, a la a little store called Target.
Mm-hmm.
And
familiar with that brand?
You've heard of them? Yeah, it starts with a T.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then on my side was wholesale, right? Independent cafes, restaurants, and then food service, hospitality, higher education, hotels. We also had a big distribution side of the business as well, and with respective leadership over those teams. But I was leading our wholesale educators, which were former baristas. Some were former Intelligentsia baristas. Some were former, independent coffee shop baristas, where we would train our new accounts.
And what was that? I want to pause there. What was it like working with those folks? Because if you're a coffee nerd, the Intelli barista team, who they send to the barista competitions every year, just when you go through the laundry list of winners from that company, it's pretty staggering. What was that like working with those baristas when you're sales minded, especially? I'm sure that when you're talking expanding wholesale, expanding grocery, a lot of those baristas probably hear the word grocery and it sends a shudder down their spine. What was it like working with them, and what was their was there kind of a give and take between sales and the barista that wants everything to be perfection with the coffee?
Yeah, I think, there's a little bit of friction, right? I mean, no organization is without friction. So I think where the alignment is that we all recognized and celebrated how, quality focused Intelligentsia was. And then with their role in direct trade being created, with a lot of the work that Jeff Watts did, we were all, drinking the Kool-Aid to varying degrees, right? But you're right. I mean, there were some different languages. The first time I ever sat around a cupping table, like, I was a little overwhelmed. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know that you could detect notes of persimmon in your coffee. Like, that was totally foreign to me, right? So I needed to get educated to speak the language. And that's what I kind of leaned on my team for, specifically our wholesale educators. And then we had account managers that would handle existing business, just maintain relationships, make sure that our customers were getting what they needed, orders were going through, they were delivered on time, and then we had account executives going after new business. And that's where I tried to tap into my kind of prospecting approach or territory development. How do you work a region? How do you pitch? So that was a relatively new concept for Intelligentsia, because most of the, at that point, they were built on their cafes, which are incredible, right? And that's a reason like they have this cult-like following, because their coffee is so damn good and their cafes are exquisite. But taking the wholesale brand, the packaged coffee to the mass market was my focus.
And that's a tough thing in coffee, is when the cafe is your focus, your standards for quality are perfection. They're like way up here, and your expectation for everything is that it tastes perfect. And there's almost this hesitation, I should say, to hand your coffee off to someone, because you're like, oh, those aren't Intelli people, or those aren't my people. They won't know how to do this coffee justice. But I tend to view it on the other side, that if the standard for coffee in the market in general is way down here, can we give our coffee, which is already going to be a step up, educate it, get it to go another step up, and it might not be that perfection, but it's going to be way better, and hopefully somebody tastes it and goes, why is this better, and starts to think about it. And so was Intelligentsia in the equipment game? So when you're going to independent customers, could you offer the full equipment lineup?
Yep, we would. Yeah, we'd install, maintain, fix, you name it. And
so what was your, looking back on it at Intelligentsia, what do you think was the strongest kind of like hook, line, and sinker for a new independent cafe about why they should serve Intelligentsia?
I think name recognition and the cachet there, because it carried so much weight. I mean, specifically in Chicago and LA, because of our cafes.
Yeah.
But, we also landed some incredible accounts like Ground Support and Gasoline Alley in New York. Incredible shops run by good people. We had great accounts, independent cafes all over the country. Even in Traverse City, Michigan, right? Great account. And so, we developed great relationships, and these are places that you would want to go and have a cup of coffee if you're traveling, right? And so that, I think, further manifested into like the strength of the brand image. And then what I tried to bring to the table was more of an approachable, collaborative type of arrangement, right? We're known for having good coffee, but it's one thing to have good coffee, but you also have to provide good service. And you need to be approachable and humble in how you do that. And so that's what I tried to have, our team focus on. And we tried to grow as much as we could. And, we had some major accounts that we landed, and, there's some battles that we lost, of course, because the coffee industry is competitive, and there's a lot of great third wave.
It's not competitive. Super easy. It's not idle hard work. It's fine.
Right. Spoken like a former football player, right? Right.
And so you're there for 2 years. Is it ultimately you wanting to move to Minneapolis or Minnesota because you have a new young family? Is that the ultimate factor that led to you leaving Intelli?
I think they went through so much transformation in such a short period of time that it led to a lot of hard decisions happening at the company. They had aspirations at that point. They'd been at it for 20 some years, right? And I think had aspirations for an acquisition. And when that happens, you have to make a lot of challenging decisions from a staffing perspective, led by the financials, right? And so a lot of the leadership team, there was some attrition there. And, I had a buddy that had been in my ear for a while from Groupon that had started another tech startup in Chicago. And so around that time, when my time was ending at Intelligentsia, my buddy tapped me and said, hey, like, we need somebody to be the GM for one of our new markets.
And so that was around the same time that they were acquired by Pete's is kind of what caused that?
The acquisition happened after that, but we were moving.
The culture and the rumblings were already there.
Yeah, I mean, we were putting all those efforts in place, for the acquisition to happen.
So at this point, you've been in a startup with extreme growth. You've been in kind of like a mid-sized company with heavy growth, and then you end up at this tech startup again. What was it like going back to kind of ground one or square one? What stage was that company in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And keep in mind, Enterprise was the first, right? So privately held, like a $15 billion company, right? Massive and very stable, right? And then to Fun Quirky Startup, then like this kind of heritage coffee brand, kind of with the boutique feel. And I went back to a tech startup. At that point, I realized I love the energy in a startup. At Groupon, we had a sense of camaraderie. Even there was friction there, though, too, of course, right? Specifically with the editorial team who was doing the write-ups to represent these merchants, and then the sales team, right? And Groupon was known for being very quirky and irreverent and politically incorrect with their humor, right? So I love the energy of a startup. You have to be disruptive. You have to be a little defiant. You have to have some audacity to think that you can pull this off when no one's done it before. I find that energizing. And they followed a lot of the playbook that we learned from Groupon. And the web interface was very similar. It's a company called Kapow, which is essentially Airbnb, but for client entertainment.
That's the classic small business pitch.
Totally.
We're the Airbnb, but for this. We're the Uber, but for this.
We only have an hour, Rob, so I want to make this succinct.
We can go over it.
Right. I know that analogy is used a lot, though.
No, but so... say the analogy again.
Airbnb, but for client entertainment.
Okay, and so what service was missing in the market that this is filling?
Yeah, so we created marketplaces. So if you wanted to host your colleagues or your clients, you could search your city's homepage on Kapow, and you could search by location, price point, head count, theme. It could be axe throwing, it could be paintball, it could be knockerball, it could be skydiving, it could be a farm to table experience, like really cool shit. Yeah. I've sworn 3 times now. Don't let my kids hear this.
All right.
Okay. No, they've heard it all before. That's okay. So this was, no one had really done this before, because you could have, there's a lot of logistics that go into planning an event. And with basically 3 clicks, you'd have a fully curated event. And so major value add for a client, could be Boston Scientific, it could be Salesforce, it could be a startup, anybody, right? And then, for the people that are going to the event, we tried to make it unique and pair it with celebrities or an experience that you normally wouldn't have had. Yeah. Right? Not just...
That's cool.
Yeah, it was experiential, right? Yeah. We doubled down on that. So I loved the feel. The office was gorgeous. It was on Wacker and Wells in Chicago, right overlooking the Chicago River. And you could see Lake Michigan. There was a bar in the office. So we would have wine with our clients, and that was part of the kind of the lifestyle and what went into creating events and experiences. So we moved from Chicago. I was the local GM for Minneapolis. Hired a great team. There was 5 of us, I think 6 actually, working right downtown at the AT&T Tower on like 9th and Marquette. Built it from scratch. I got the chance to hire some great people, and we followed the Groupon trajectory, right? Land grab. We had some venture capital behind us. We had some budget, right? We had fun events as a team, but we worked really hard. Mm-hmm. And, I had to push our team because we had really audacious goals. We had 45 days to launch 30 venues, fully curated experiences. So Walker Art Center, Travail, like some kick-ass places. And so to convince these venues to bring us in when we're brand new was a feat, but we pulled it off because I had a great team and we worked together, and they were pros. I mean, we hired a lot of people with event planning experience, and I'm actually getting chills thinking about it. That ended abruptly, however, because the company was struggled to raise a subsequent round of funding, and they since got acquired. Yeah.
And so what do you think? I know very little about raising money. What do you so with the presumed success of what was going down and successful launches into these, what led to that difficulty in raising money?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I wasn't a part of those conversations. At the time, what year was this? 2014, 2015? No, it would have been later than that. It would have been around 2016. At the time, the companies that were actually raising money were like Airbnb or Uber or Lyft, right? I think the venture capital landscape was pretty competitive, but only for a few companies that raised a ton of capital. And so if you weren't those handful of outliers, you weren't able to raise much money.
Right.
And when you raise money, especially that amount, and you hire that many people, expectations are super high.
Right.
Because the investors want a strong ROI, and if certain metrics aren't hit, like tough decisions have to be made.
Yeah.
At this point, we're expecting our second child, right? And so I thought, wow, got to go back to the drawing board.
And so this is 2014, 2015.
Don't quote me on that. I got to check my dates. Everything's been a blur the last 10 years of my life.
Well, the easiest way to go back would be, what year do you found Humble Nut Butter? Because I find that it's much easier to remember what was going on during that time than any other flow. So if you go back to, when was Humble Nut Butter founded?
So I had one more stop after Kapow.
Yeah, here we go.
I sold supply chain software for about 2 years, leading a small team. And that was for a great company, financially stable, selling to supply chain software. Not necessarily my passion or cup of tea, but we had some talented folks, and we kicked ass, frankly. But Humble, to answer your question, was the idea came to us in the fall of 2017. Okay, so let me back up for a second. I know we've been jumping around. Over the course of my career, specifically, I've had a lot of ideas, business ideas, that I simply just didn't execute on. And Jess and I, we've now been married. God, our anniversary's coming up, Rob. June 15th. It'll be 6 years.
Sounds like you just remembered that.
Don't tell her. Don't tell her. So, yeah, we've had a lot of ideas. Most of our ideas have been, geared towards healthy food and beverage. We came really close to launching an apple cider vinegar beverage company in Chicago. This is like 8 years ago now. Jess had bad heartburn with her first pregnancy. She went online looking for remedies. She didn't want to take Tums or Alka-Seltzer, and apple cider vinegar kept popping up as a remedy. And there's a bunch of health benefits for apple cider vinegar. And when I thought about that, I thought, what, we should be consuming this more. Why aren't humans drinking this like they are?
Because it's disgusting.
Yes, right. Straight up. Yeah, straight up, it is disgusting.
I take a shot before heavy carb days.
Yeah, do you?
Yeah, it helps with carb regulation during pre-meal, and a shot of that straight is
it's harsh.
You're like, oh, well, a shot of whiskey's hard. No, that makes a shot of whiskey look like a nice, calm beverage. It's aggressive.
And it's hard on the esophagus.
Yeah, highly acidic, highly aggressive.
I've got a recipe I'll share with you offline. You can't have it on the podcast, though. So we developed 3 flavors. I took it to one of my little neighborhood grocers in Wicker Park, and they said, listen, if you're ready, we will buy this from you now. And I said, okay, I'm not ready. I'm making this illegally in my kitchen. Let me get back to you. And we did more research and realized the timing wasn't right for a variety of reasons. Okay, but so that was in the back of my mind. Should we have done something with apple cider vinegar? Meanwhile, 2 jobs later, I've been in sales, knowing I wanted to do something different and kind of make a bet on myself. Fall of 2017, both of our kids are in bed for the night. Jess and I, at this point, for years, as consumers, we've been seeking out snacks that were not sweet, that were tasty, but also nutritious, right? And we would have hummus and beef jerky. That was it. Why is there no other option? And not chips, not a bunch of carbs, not anything loaded with dairy. I can't believe there's nothing else to go to. And we'd also watched this documentary called Fed Up. You seen that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we were outraged by the overconsumption of sugar and refined sugars and how big food played a part of that.
That rabbit hole, that's a deep one, man. I forget what year, but it's like the 50s where the sugar corporation or sugar industry, whatever it is, paid scientists off to go off and say fat is the problem. Fat is what's bad for you. Sugar is not bad for you. Don't worry about it. And that laid true for like 40, 50 years before it really came back. And I love conspiracy theories. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I love conspiracy theories. I'm definitely not, but it's almost like watching reality TV where you're like, this is terrible. I want to consume as much of this as possible.
Yeah.
And that was one where like, oh wait, that is completely true. Like there's verified sources across the board. Scientists straight up paid off about sugar. So in America for 50 years, it's been like, don't eat fat. And then sugar is really the thing that's like driving so many of the issues in our country.
Right. And Fed Up highlighted, in the 90s when we had this low fat / no fat movement, diabetes and obesity skyrocketed because they're injecting these products with sugar because they took the fat out. So that really pissed us off. It's probably 9 o'clock at night. It was the fall of 2017 and Jess and I wanted the snack. We went into our kitchen to see what we had. And we had hummus, of course. We had popcorn. We had chips and salsa. We had cheese and crackers. We were uninspired by all of those things. But we also had nuts and random spices like turmeric and rosemary and truffle zest. And Jess asked this question, why are all the nut butters sweet or plain, but you can get nuts that are smoked or Cajun or barbecue? And I thought, all right, well, that's an interesting question. But I had another idea on my mind, which I can't tell you about yet. But the more we researched the market and realized that there's something to be had here, because nut butter is satiating. It doesn't take a lot to satisfy you. And with the savory option, it's far more culinary and versatile than the standard like used for the PB&J. And we thought, okay, there's something here. And so we spent a year on the recipes. Jess created all of the recipes from scratch. She's talented in the kitchen, but she's not a trained chef. And I've got a decent palate.
And so
that's.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to lose this thought.
Go for it.
2017, companies like Justin's Nut Butter at this point are doing very well.
Yeah, I think he had been acquired by Hormel.
Right. So at this point, the concept of because if you said nut butter, they'd be like, that sounds, I don't know what you just said. It sounds gross. But at this point, the idea of a nut butter that's not peanut butter is pretty widely accepted that this is a thing.
Yeah, Justin's, I think, definitely exposed the masses to, what a better alternative could be.
Like almond butter,
cashew, etc. Right? But we realized all of the nut butters are either sweet or plain.
Yeah.
So spent a year in the recipes. Jess created all of these, and we tasted every single batch. And then we were surveying friends and family on the attributes and what they thought of the product. What would they pay for it? And we made some refinement based on that feedback. And we thought, all right, at this point, we're not getting any younger. I've worked for 5 companies at this point. Like, it's time to make a bet on myself again and go all in. And so our go-to market strategy was the Twin Cities farmers markets. Mm-hmm. So we started at the Excelsior farmers markets. That happened on Tuesdays. It worked for our schedule. And then we went to the Linden Hills farmers market. And from June of 17, this is now 18. So June of 18 to December of 18, we did like 23 farmers markets. And when I say we was basically me, because Jess was at home with our 2 young children, and she helped as much as she could. And I think we sold out of like 8 or 9 of those markets. And so that was validating that people weren't just being nice; they were actually like spending money on our product. So that created a little bit of a groundswell, and that allowed us to get into some of the local co-ops here.
And at that time, what do you what size jar are you selling? What's the price point on it compared to if you were to do a peanut butter or like a Justin's nut butter?
Yeah, so the jars that you see here are really our original version. We spent some time looking at different logos and labels and kind of color schemes. There's a lot of white on the market. There's not as much black as you might expect. So we would actually take mock-ups into the stores and set them on the shelf and see how it looked against our perceived competitors. We frankly, we didn't know what to price it at. I mean, we knew that we had to have enough margin to make this a viable business, a sustainable business. But we started, at $12 per jar at the Excelsior Farmers Market, our first ever. And we did super well. And we realized that's not enough margin for us to sustain because we're buying the best quality ingredients we can find. And we're using glass, right? There's a cost associated with that. And then all of our herbs and spices are certified organic, and the cashews we use are fair trade and organic. So we're not bullshitting here. Like we're getting the highest quality ingredients that you can get, and I think people that acknowledge that are willing. They realize that you get what you pay for.
Well, and pricing is something that I've learned a lot about, and one of them that you realize is that if you price competitively, you're going to get the same customer that's used to deep deals, that's used to the normal pricing. And if their main reason for buying your product is because it was on sale or the price was close enough to what I got already that I decided to change, it's probably not going to be a permanent customer, a lifelong customer, even if the taste is awesome, if it's their secondary reason for buying it. And the odd thing is that if you price based on your ingredients and you have really high ingredients, you're going to be higher priced. But that person is buying you because of your ingredients, because of the flavor.
Exactly.
And it's funny because for an 8.4 ounce or 8.8 ounce jar, a lot of people might say that $12 even, which is where you started, seems aggressive. But they've also never tasted what you're doing.
Right. And that's why sampling is so vital. And that's why the farmers markets were really important for us, because people hadn't had this product before. And some of the questions we got at the farmers markets led to packaging decisions, like the sticker you see on the top of the lid says "Try me on," right? So sandwiches, wraps, veggies, crackers with our turmeric maple pecan. It's got a little bit of sweetness to it.
To be clear, "Try me on," and then it lists food, not just "Try me on."
Yeah, exactly. I think this is not a T-shirt.
That would be something we wouldn't allow on the podcast.
That's why you're the podcast director here, Rob. That's why you're the man. So. That those questions and conversations were vital for us, and understanding how the consumer is going to think about our product. But yeah, I mean this is versatile, right? There's a lot that you can do with this, and it's not a single use. You get 17 servings in it. People will go, or used to go to restaurants, and we'd spend $12 for a glass of wine that we'd finish in 30 minutes, right? Like you get 17 uses here, you can do a lot with it, and those conversations can happen when you're talking to people directly. When you take that off the table, you can't sample at grocery stores, you're faced with a whole different host of challenges, which is why we tried to go omni-channel from the get-go, right? So online, D2C, direct to grocery stores, and then, we have some restaurant accounts as well, and we're thinking about food service down the road when that comes back.
When's the thing? So going from farmers markets, who were the first people you approached, and what was their feedback in terms of like the taste, the product itself, and then of course pricing was probably a big discussion.
Yeah, when we sold out, essentially, I think we came close to selling out of the very first market, and we realized, okay, well, we can actually maybe charge a little bit more, because we wanted to give people a good deal, because we were actually nervous, like we didn't know how it would go. So one of the first customers we had was Beth Dooley, who is just a great person. She won a James Beard Award for her writing of The Sous Chef, a Native American inspired cookbook. Yeah. And we met her at the Linden Hills Farmers Market, and she loved what we were doing and said, hey, you should take this to Lake Winds. And so I heeded her advice, and we went to Lake Winds, and a little bit of back and forth, and we got in, and they've been a great partner. And then
Lake Winds, for context, all natural co-op, very, very heavy organic focus. Yep. Yeah, very quality, local sourcing.
Exactly. Yeah. They give local brands a chance, right?
And that's a great example of a retailer that price is not going to be the first thing they ask you. They're going to ask you, is it organic? Is it local? Is it independently owned?
Exactly. Like they're mindful of the values behind the brands, right? And but it's also important for us to be smart about and have self-awareness about where our stuff would not sell. There's most grocers we haven't approached because it's not a fit. Like this current iteration of Humble is not going to be a fit at the common conventional grocery store, and that's okay. That's not a knock on those consumers. It's just you got to know your lane. When we have innovation in the works that is more broad appealing, but we're fine focusing on a more narrow channel because that channel, you can go deep and wide in that channel. The channel's big enough.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about branding and what you focus on is that if you try to reach everybody all at once, you're not going to reach anybody, because when you don't have the resources, if you're not a Coke, you're not a Pepsi, to just pound it into everybody's head with a huge marketing budget, you need to be known for one thing and one thing only, and you need to do that really, really well. And so I'm curious, I'm assuming you're going to have to do this offline about what the more broad-reaching product is, but when you build a reputation on quality, you're then almost allowed to try other things that are more broad appealing because you've built a reputation for doing it quality focused. And then even if it's something that's more approachable or more price point sensitive, that they know you're doing that version of it the best. And that's what Justin's actually did recently, was they launched a peanut butter.
Yeah.
And you think about that and you're like, well, that's not innovation. Like, I could go get 10 different peanut butters, but they built a reputation on a $10 jar of almond butter versus a $2.50, $3, I don't know what Skippy goes for, $3.
Probably, yeah.
And so you know that when they release a peanut butter, that it's going to be a great peanut butter, all natural. And I think what you're doing in terms of flavor and quality and organic focus, there is that opportunity to be more broad appealing with another product, but by leading the way with the super high end of the category.
Right. Yeah, you have to build the trust with the customers first, and you have to deliver for them. And it's more than just a quality product. Like, your service has to be good or great, actually. Mm-hmm. And you have to be transparent. I think nowadays people can look between the lines and smell bullshit when they smell it or see it, I guess.
And so we're skipping again. Where were you making this stuff for the farmers market?
Yeah, so we got the cottage food license first in Minnesota. So that's where we started, making it in our home kitchen. And then quickly realized, all right, like, we're going to scale this because there's more demand.
Yeah.
So we went to Lynn Hall, great spot. They had an incubator kitchen in the middle of the restaurant. So that was our first commercial kitchen. We outgrew that, I think, in the first 3 months. Just needed more space. And so we went to JHAP in Golden Valley, which is a great spot. They've got this immaculate commercial kitchen inside of a residence for adults with disabilities. And as a result of that transition, we got introduced to a gal named Nicole Rabinowitz, who owns Inclusive Networking. And she provides customized employment. So she helps job seekers of all abilities find meaningful work. And so as a result of Nicole's help, we've found our production assistant, who's tremendous. His name's Tim. You'll see more about Tim on Instagram. So he's our production assistant. We also have a production manager named Alex. So we have a very lean team, but they're great. And so JHAP has been good to us. It's allowed us to grow and expand, but ultimately provide meaningful work to Tim, and he helps us because we need the help. So he helps with labeling, packaging, shipping, and he knows the drill, man. I mean, he's punctual. Mm-hmm. He's got a tremendous work ethic. We have fun together.
Yeah.
He loves sports. We've got a lot to talk about. And
so did that move, was that from the farmer's market into grocery stores that you start to move into the larger production facility, now have a production assistant?
Yeah. We had, we wanted to make sure we could balance supply and demand. So a lot of our growth has been intentionally deliberate, right? Like, I haven't, there's major chains that I haven't even reached out to yet. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make sure we could fulfill for the existing accounts, knowing that Jess still works full-time for the University of Minnesota, so we've got these constraints, right? There's only so many hours in the day. We only have so much available bandwidth. So we've scaled slowly but steadily. And, we started with Lake Winds, then we got into the Linden Hills Co-op. So Lake Winds has 3 locations, Linden Hills Co-op. In our neighborhood, there was a lot of pent-up demand from the farmers markets that got us into Linden Hills Co-op, and then the Wedge, and then a handful of restaurant accounts and bakeries. Mm-hmm. Amazon was an early play for us. Of course, our website, and then there's some online marketplaces like Bubble Goods. There's some more that are popping up that you should be thinking about too for Folly, which we can talk about. And then Pop-Up Grocer, which is a pretty innovative concept. That's a traveling pop-up kind of boutique grocery concept that features innovative products, stuff that's not as common.
And So when you're going to these new places, what is your sales pitch? Was there a lot of resistance to it because of the price or because of the quality and the taste of it? Was it pretty widely accepted to these quality-focused co-ops and restaurants?
Yeah, no, it took some conversing, but I think the second that people try it, their eyes light up.
Yeah.
And because they really haven't had anything like it before. So that's generally the catalyst for a productive conversation. And then, I think when they understand what we're trying to accomplish, like we're not doing this to be famous. Mm-hmm. We solved a need that we had as consumers, right? Everybody knows the damage that sugar is doing. So, we want to combat that, but also give you products that are delightful and surprising. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm able to get that opportunity to tell to a grocery buyer, it makes for a productive conversation. We also had some help from Fresh Coast Collective that did our photography early on, and they made a great video for us. And so we tried to pair a great product with great visuals and then weave the story in there.
Yeah, the video and visuals early on is very important. I'm going to highlight that because I'm sure a lot of your emails initially to chains, they're like, who the heck are you? Like, another farmer's market person that wants me to be carried in their store. Overspending or over allocating resources to video and visual early on is so important because being able to include a little something extra in that email that you're trying to get a meeting is incredibly important.
I agree, especially if you want to scale nationally. Yeah. Right? It has to look dialed.
Yeah.
But more than that, it's got to look dialed, but the product's got to back it up too.
And the argument against that I've heard is, well, I don't want to look too polished. I want them to know it's independently owned. Well, you can't scale on that. And I don't even mean you can't scale from like a growth in production. You go, oh, no, we'll figure out how to grow. But if your customers early on are buying your product because it's scrappy, it's not professional, well, then when at some point you do level up and you do upgrade that production, your initial customers aren't going to like what you're doing.
Right.
And so it's like creating, I've always said with Folly, people think it's bigger than it is because of the stuff that we do.
Yeah.
And I'd rather explain to somebody and say, no, it's two of us and we're independently owned, and have them be surprised than have them say, oh, no, we're bigger than you think, and have them be like, oh, really, you don't seem like it.
Right.
And that's with Humble Nut Butters early on. You're like, the branding's clean. It's like it exudes what you're trying to do. It's quality focus. It's like, but it still has that like quality authenticity.
Yeah.
And it's a tough balance. It is a tough balance to not be corporate and to not be like. Right now is a great example with the way things are culturally going on in Minneapolis. Is so many responses to everything are too polished. They're too clean, and people are too concerned about what the general masses might think. It's almost thinking of marketing in the same way you're targeting your customers as being like true to yourself in it.
Right. Yeah. Heavy times in Minneapolis, by the way. But I agree with you. I think in order for progress to be made, you have to have those conversations. It's tough to draw a parallel to, a CPG product and, the deep-seated racism that we're facing in the Twin Cities. But if you just sit around and overanalyze, you're not going to make any progress. So you got to start somewhere, and then you can make modifications by, meeting people in the middle and where they're at without compromising your values, if that makes sense.
And so launching in these co-ops, do the sales immediately start picking up? Do you have to start sampling? How were your expectations for launching at retail versus how they actually were?
Our expectations were that we didn't know what to expect. Yeah. We thought it would be an uphill climb because there's a lot of education that has to go in when you have a new product.
Yeah.
Right? And so we knew that sampling was going to be a big part of the strategy. And, if we can have those conversations, we see great results, during a 3-hour demo. Mm-hmm. And we were doing that often. Yeah. And that's been shut off now. So that's a challenge. And we just launched in Whole Foods, 7 locations in Minnesota, which was a year and a half in the making, by the way. With Whole Foods, we knew, to my point earlier about, knowing your lane, we suspect Whole Foods could be a great place for us. It's too early to tell. Like, we're not even on the shelves at all of the 7 stores yet. That was educational for me. I assumed like we deliver and a few days later we'd be on the shelves. Well, that didn't happen at all 7 locations. So, there's a lot of complexities, and they're also facing a lot of challenges themselves. Being in the midst of a pandemic, now we've got riots going on, and lots of tension, across the entire country. So we think Whole Foods could be a great place for us because the shopper there is generally more focused on quality and better for you ingredients, and they might be a little bit more well versed and know when to smell BS, and Whole Foods won't even bring it in if it's BS, right?
Yeah, it's a tough thing in coffee because there, as a side tangent, the big companies have been so good at driving home certain messages that now the consumer is educated in a way that if you don't follow that exact messaging, they think it's bad. It's a whole side tangent.
Yeah.
And so because I saw the announcement recently that you launched in Whole Foods. How close to was this mid-pandemic?
The whole process took about a year and a half. And
how can a sales process take a year and a half? Don't you get a no at some point and you go, okay, this is done, or a yes?
You know this.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you know the answer to the question.
I'm pandering, but I want to hear.
Yeah, no, you get it because you have to have persistence, and not persistence in a way that is annoying, but if you believe in what you're selling and you're selling a good product that consumers will like it's going to benefit them. So to a degree, you also have to just be patient and kind of pick your spots. So eventually, there's some communication that stalled. I just tried to follow the model that we had from the farmers markets. You build a groundswell, you get feedback from directly from people, and you take that up the chain. And so I tried to develop some relationships with the store level Whole Foods folks, gave them our product, got feedback from them. They recognized an opportunity in the set, right? Because all the nut butters are sweet or plain. They realized that consumers want things like turmeric, or they're interested in shiitake mushrooms.
Yeah, the ingredients on these three, it's turmeric, maple, truffle herb, walnut, turmeric, maple, pecan, I should say, truffle herb, walnut. You've got sun-dried basil, cashew, or as the Brits like to say, basil.
Yeah, right.
And that's...
Or turmeric. I'm glad you didn't say turmeric, so props to you.
Yeah. There's an R in
turmeric,
there.
Yeah. Yeah, so we launched, they said, good news, we'll bring you on. And honestly, we were nervous because this is mid-pandemic. And, what we saw, towards the latter half of March, if you paid attention to what was selling on the shelves, people were panic shopping. Everybody's buying psychology was very negative. They were going to get in the store and get out, right? They're getting toilet paper and paper towels and shelf-stable stuff. So even great companies like Bonza Pasta, their stuff's just sitting on the shelves, right? Initially, within the first 2 or 3 weeks. I do think that the psychology has regained a little bit more optimism. And so you see, more normal buying behavior is happening, but it's still not to where it was pre-pandemic when the economy was strong. So Jess and I talked a lot about this and, kind of referred to some friends and got their opinion. Some are, CPG folks like Seven Sundays Muesli Company. We got their opinion. They're national at Whole Foods, and they were very hopeful with their response. So we decided to give it a go. Whole Foods gives you a shot. It's like our dream account. F it, go for it.
Yeah.
So it's still early. We just delivered a couple weeks ago. And hopefully we'll get to a point where we can sample again. And if we can't, we'll have to contract that out. And we'll have to do some creative things digitally, which I'll pick your brain on too, because you've obviously got an eye for that and an knack for digital, promotions, if you will. So there's no real playbook for this. There's no playbook for launching a differentiated product in a brand new marketplace during a pandemic.
Yeah.
And then you add racial tensions and everything else on top of that. So it's an odd time.
Yeah.
But, things will regain some level of normalcy in time.
Yeah. And that's the difficulty in small business right now, especially in Minnesota, is everything is so not normal. And I'd say that in the most intense kind of way. And that this is a conversation purely outside of that. And it almost feels weird to talk about things like this at this time, but it's almost like you have to compartmentalize in a pretty intense degree during times like this and it's hard mentally, almost physically in a way, to balance things during this time because of that. And, but I'm excited. I'd love in a year we should do a follow-up of some sort. I'll put it on the calendar in my own and say, reach back out to you. Let's do a year check-in, because one of the few things that like gives me hope during this time, or almost excitement, which is so hard to find, is that because of how humans work, that we'll all get through it. And because of the product you have and the quality you have, you're less susceptible to competitors, and you have very loyal customers that you're not going to probably thrive during this time, but you'll get by. Yeah. And then Folly's the same way. We're definitely down a lot versus last year now, but we have loyal customers and a product that people like and quality focus. But a year from now, it'll be super interesting to look back on this date where we are now, mid-pandemic, mid-rioting happening, racial tensions, not knowing what is going to be of our city in a month, and what the dynamic there will be. But and that puts us over an hour. And there's obviously a lot more stuff to touch on. Amazon, I'd love to pick your brain about that, both offline and potentially just hop back on here, because I know you are doing really well on Amazon. Anything else you want to add or include about Humble Nut Butter, or just where you guys are trying to go with it?
Well, first, thanks for having me again, Rob. I appreciate it. That hour flew by. It was a fluid conversation. And I would love to come back and talk about where we're at, both in terms of as a society and a community here in the Twin Cities, and then also talk about our respective businesses. No, I think hopefully folks have a good sense for what we're trying to do. I mean, we're transparent. We want to deliver quality products always. As we evolve, our mission is to provide products that delight and surprise, and so we want to lead with the product. And then from there, you can apply marketing and you can apply messaging, but we're personable people. I try to respond to every single Amazon review we get. I don't know if that's sustainable. In fact, Jess told me last night it's not sustainable when I'm up responding to every review, even the negative ones.
But knowing you're like, dang it! Now that you said it, now I have to show you that. Yes. No, this is.
Yeah, and now I'm accountable, right? Yeah. Now I announced it. So. We want to be. We're focused on quality, but we also want to be approachable, and we want to grow, and we want to make this a consciously capitalistic company, where we can show that you can make a good product that people want and need, but you do so in an honest way that's not self-fulfilling, and we can hopefully eventually become a place where people want to work. And we can provide more meaningful work to people. We've done that on a very small scale. Now we just need to grow.
Yeah. I like it, man.
Awesome.
I pretty much did this like 95% just so I could get samples. If I'm being completely honest.
I'm not mad at you.
I'm not mad at you. Yeah, I can hardly stand you, but these are so good.
Of course.
I probably can't just ask for them. That'd be rude. So I guess we'll do a podcast.
No,
I think you yourself have a unique position with your background. We have a similar background, yours to a much more extreme level of experience, of that like halfway in between of the passion for business and really enjoying that side of it, but also having a product that fulfilled a need in your life. And the depth of flavor of this, it's like very obvious that you can always tell when somebody finds a category, is like, we need to make something in that category, they make it. And it's not quite there, but that's not the case with Humble Nut Butter, man. So I'll end this episode as I do every other one and say, have a good day.